Here's today's First Word Daily Devotion.
Here we are towards the end of January. It's January the 29th, and we mark a change in the biblical narrative as we continue the story, as we turn today to the book of Exodus, and we read Exodus chapter 1. And we'll see today, on January the 29th, some marked contrast. Notice all the contrasts that are being drawn into the text. Here we have the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt, and also we have Joseph, who was already in Egypt. But notice the contrast that we see first in verse 7 or verse 6. Joseph died, all his brothers, and all that generation. But, here's the first contrast, the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly and multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. Notice again, we're learning the language of the Bible. And the language of the Bible is important for us. We see this fruitful language as well as multiplied language. That language is Genesis language. And of course we have land language, which also not only echoes back to the Garden of Eden, but it also echoes back to Genesis 12 and the promise that God gave to Abraham. Except the land that they're in now is not the promised land. So there's another contrast. And verse 8 shows us another contrast. There arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And this Pharaoh gave them heavy burdens that we see in verse 11. And then look at this contrast at verse 12. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied. We have another contrast at verse 17. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. Now again, another contrast, verse 20. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people, there's this word again, multiplied and grew very strong. And because of the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Now here's our last contrast, verse 22. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall cast into the Nile. And then we have this. As we flip the narrative or turn the narrative, we turn next to Matthew chapter 16 for our New Testament reading. And notice what we have. We have an allusion here to something that we're going to see later as we continue to read, something that will be explained to us as we come explicitly to the book of Jonah. Look at verse 4. He said, An evil and adulterous generation seeks for signs, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah. Now, what's the sign of Jonah? Well, we can use our imagination, and we can use our sanctified imagination informed by what we know about the Bible, but we'll definitely see the book of Jonah in our readings. And so, hopefully, as we're reading the Bible, you're anticipating some of these things. And the reason that we want to anticipate these things is because we want to, as verse 9 tells us, have a memory. We want our memory to be informed by the act of God. Now some of you say, well, wait a minute here. Jesus is talking about the faith that they had that was little because he was with them or they were with him rather, when they multiplied the bread. And some of you say, well, wait, I've not seen Jesus multiply bread. Well, yes, you have. You say, how have I seen it? You've seen it through the eyes of faith. You've seen it through the text, and prayerfully you believe in it. And so verse 9 is true of us. Do you not yet perceive? Do you not remember? So here we have, as we're reading the biblical narrative, we want to be steeped in the revelation of God. We want our minds soaking in the revelation of God so that we can have a memory. Look at verse 20. Look at Psalm 26. Psalm 26 in particular as it relates to the story of the midwives. Vindicate me, O Lord, for I've walked in my integrity. I've trusted in the Lord without wavering. Prove me, O Lord, and try me. Test my heart and my mind. For your steadfast love is ever before my eyes, and I walk in your faithfulness. And so here we are learning as we encounter God through his word. We are learning the steadfast love and faithfulness of the Lord.